coming to the next address, which is by Dr. Ajit Ranade, a former VC of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, on impact of climate change on economy and possible solution. We are honored to have Dr. Ajit Ranade, a distinguished economist and a political analyst. He has made significant contributions in the field of economics, serving as a group executive president and chief economist of the Aditya Birla Group. He has been a columnist for several Indian newspapers, sharing insights on political and economic matters. He is also a co founder and trustee of the Association for Democratic Reforms, an organization committed to enhancing transparency in Indian politics. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ajit Ranade to share his perspectives on the economic dimensions of climate change.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And let me begin by thanking Professor Dr. Amitav Malik for inviting me to speak today. And of course, there are many others who have come here, very senior people, Dr. Mashelkar, of course, Dr. Gargil, Dr. Krishnan, General Patankar, and there are many others in the audience as well, very, what should I say, serious scholars and students of this issue. So my topic is, what I want to share with you are some thoughts about the economics of climate change or economics of the subject that we are discussing. And I have a lot to say, but I'm not going to say it because I have only about 15-20 minutes, which I will try to use. So let me begin by taking some of the comments which were made earlier. So Dr. Mashelkar said, I hope he comes back because he stepped out. He said that, we gather here. So I'm thankful that all of you have come here on a Saturday morning. So before I forget, let me again wish all of you a very happy International Women's Day. I know a lot of women are very justifiably bothered that why should there be one Women's Day? So we should also celebrate one Men's Day. So with due caveat, I think since it's observed everywhere, I wish you all a happy International Women's Day. But also wish you a very happy, I think, 104th anniversary of the birth of a great poet of India, Sahir Ludhianvi. Because he was also born on 8th of March. And by the way, he's of course one of the most extraordinary poets who influenced our modern generations and also Hindi cinema, but also very fiercely strong feminist, if I can say so. So actually his birthday falling on Women's Day is not a coincidence, or perhaps it is a deliberate coincidence. So I want to start off by saying that Dr. Mashelkar said that we all assemble here and I want to hear new ideas. I don't want to hear the same thing again and again. So I want to slightly beg to differ with him that actually this topic is such that it bears repetition 100 times or 1,000 times. So it is okay to repeat the ideas again and again because this is such an important topic, and still if we don't see very concrete and visible behavioral change, then we just have to play the same tune until some change happens. As we heard from Dr. Krishnan, and I was going to mention that we have now 29 annual conferences, right? The COP, Committee of Parties, and 1990 is taken as a benchmark, by the way, that the CO2 emissions that we track, we take 1990, and the idea is to actually reduce our emissions or to below that level. So at least come down to that level or below that. That's the kind of general idea. But in fact, we are for 50% above. So not only have we not been able to reduce, but actually we are 50%, or he said 48% above. So actually it's going up. So it is important to keep on repeating, I think. So with due respect to Dr. Mashelkar, I think these kind of meetings and the indefatigable energy of Dr. Malik, that I've attended quite a few of his meetings, so it's very important. I know it's a Saturday, but these kind of meetings are important. That's first thing. Second is that this topic that we are discussing today, actually, in the previous talk by Dr. Krishnan, you saw a lot of science. So this topic has a lot of science, but my job is to talk about the economics of it. But this topic is not only restricted to science or economics, it has politics, it has ethics, it has philosophy, and maybe if you think about broader things, demography, development policies. So actually, this is really cross-cutting in a really, true sense. So you can't say that this is only a scientific issue or this is only a economic issue. It's actually cross-cutting. So, and we need to make the dialogue or the messaging much more simpler because to give you a current example, people nowadays discuss a lot is how is AI, tell us how is AI going to affect us. A few years ago, we used to ask, how is climate change going to affect us? So if I ask you, how is AI going to affect, artificial intelligence, how is it going to affect us? So a very good answer to that somebody gave recently was, think of AI as internet. There was a time 20, 30 years ago, we used to say, Acha, internet, how is it going to affect us? But now internet is part of our life. Internet is a way of life. Or, similarly, AI is going to be very soon a part of our life. So same thing, climate change, we say, how is climate change going to affect us? Actually, unless we make it as a part of our life, day-to-day living or scholarship or activities, economics, the economic policy, that's where we should be headed to. So I'm going to try and present some ideas to you to convince you about how we can go ahead. I mean, what is involved. I'm going to make a series of comments. So it is not. I'm not trying to present to you a coherent theory. I just now said, in artificial intelligence, like internet, climate change, these are not just isolated topics to be studied. I think this is supposed to become part of our day-to-day economic life and scholarship and policies. So what I want to say, that's the takeaway. Okay, if there's one takeaway from my 20 minutes is that it used to be the case that say in a company you present the budget target for next year, and then slowly they started adding an annexure. So what is the carbon footprint impact of your profit making next year? Similarly, in the union budget, we keep saying this is the budget presented by the government, and there's going to be one chapter on green budgeting, or maybe one chapter on gender budgeting. So long as it's just an annexure, that's not. I would think what I'm trying to say is that everything has to become mainstream. So there will come a time, and I'm optimistic about it, that it will become mainstream. So Dr. Mashelkar, since you have come here, I just wanted to mention, please, that I began by saying that I beg to differ one comment of yours. Since he has come, please allow me to repeat what I said. That you began, yes, I know. It was, yes, only one. That you somewhere in your initial comment, you said that we are gathered here for new ideas. I don't want to hear the same ideas again and again and again. But in this particular context, I want to say that there is no end to the number of times we need to repeat this message until it becomes ingrained in our day-to-day living, our policy making, and our scholarship and our understanding. So we have been saying this for a long time, but we need to just keep on repeating this message. But I'll explain to you offline what I had to say to justify my differing with you. I also want to say, why is it that despite repetitions, there is so much talk when the scientists and people like this environment, like my friend Dr. Gurdas Nulkar, when they all assemble here, there's a lot of spook talk. Doomsday is coming. Yes, spook, everything is a gloomy picture. And still, a lot of people are just, they just shrug their shoulders. Hey, look, after some time, you will lose credibility. So many times I've said. So there is a reason for this. First of all, with now the current president in the United States, there are a lot of people who are in his team who are very skeptical. But I'm going back to a few years back, 5 years ago, COVID. So when we early days of COVID, no less a publication than the New York Times said that the discovery or the synthesis of the COVID vaccine is going to take at least 10 years. And then therefore beyond that, the dissemination and the distribution. But they were proved hopelessly wrong. We can try and analyze why were they so wrong. But their prediction was disproved very quickly. And we have a fantastic success story about, we can debate how many people died and what could have been avoidable and all these very harsh lockdowns. Was the policy not unnecessarily harsh, and did we not kill livelihoods because of it? But that's not my point. My point is, if mainstream publications like New York Times and many others gave us this spook story, and they were disproved very quickly. If you are not convinced of that, let me give you another example, which is a few years ago. There is something called the Club of Rome. Club of Rome made a prediction that the Earth, the planet, is going to run out of resources in very quickly, in a few decades, or by the end of 1990s, I think, or by the end of this. And they were following the tradition. The Club of Rome was a collection of, I think, eminent scientists and economists and sociologists, and they were following in the tradition of Malthus, the great Thomas Malthus, who made this famous, if you know his idea, Malthusian economics. So Malthusian idea is that resources will grow arithmetically, but demand will grow geometrically, and we will run out of resources. So this was the Club of Rome prediction. But as you know, I'll not go through most of the details, but there is a very famous bet. So I'll just read it out to you. So there is a famous bet between Julian Simon, a professor, business professor, economics professor, pardon me, you can say from my gang, and a biologist, Paul Ehrlich, very eminent biologist called Paul Ehrlich. He said, Julian Simon challenged him that we will bet. So because Paul Ehrlich, in the same tradition of the environmentalists today, I'm just saying factually, I'm not trying to pass any value judgment, but Paul Ehrlich kept on saying about the resource scarcity in the decade leading to 1990. And this was, there's a lot of debate going on. And so Simon challenged Ehrlich to choose a raw material that he wanted and a date more than a year away, because he's making a prediction, and that he would bet that the prices of that resource will actually come down, not increase. So it was given to Paul Ehrlich, this scientist. You choose. Tumi choose kara. Aap choose kijiye, and we'll find out what happens. And therefore, Mr. Ehrlich chose copper, chromium, nickel, tin, and tungsten. The bet was made on September 29, 1980. And September 29, 1990 was the payoff date. So you and I make a bet. You are the scarcity spooker. I said, nahi, aapka prediction galat hai. And we make a bet, and 10 years later, we'll see who's right. So it's not 100 years, because we keep, Dr. Krishnan, as I said, I have to keep saying, with due respect to all of you, all these predictions, 2100 mein aisa hoga, and pralay atal hai, pralay is coming. So instead of making a 100-year bet when both of us want to be there, this bet was made only for 10 years, right? And indeed, you know what happened? I mean, you know all this, right? What happened was that Mr. Ehrlich lost the bet, and all 5 commodities that they bet in 1980, the price had declined. So this is fact. At a time when we're living in inflation, you might find it a little odd. But the same thing is about food prices. The Club of Rome said there's going to be food scarcity. Actually, food prices have come down, much to the dismay of the African continent, which were exporters of primary commodities and food products. So countries which depend on export of primary commodities, it's bad news for them when commodity prices go down. But that's the story. Not even a gram of chocolate grows anywhere in Europe, as far as I know, or in America. We never associate chocolate. It's always Swiss chocolate and Belgian chocolate and whatnot, Austrian chocolate and American. But all the cocoa comes from Africa. So cocoa prices never seem to go up. But chocolate prices are always becoming premium. So anyway, so that's I just want to caution you that we are doing all this prediction. I'm not here, by the way, to doubt all this science behind climate change. I'm just saying that because we have to find out, this is going back to Dr. Mashelkar's comment, why is it that the people at large, we are not able to, I mean, they've come a long way. From 1992 was the first Rio summit. So we are now 33 years later, we have come a long way. We have announced net zero. We have achieved, I think, 100 gigawatts of renewable energy, and ambition is to go to 500 gigawatts in the next 5 years. So we have achieved quite a bit, but still, there are these problems that the biggest, richest country in the world walks out of Paris Agreement. They're walking out of WHO. They're going to, so why is it that it's happening today? So that's one thing I wanted to, I started by saying that firstly, it's not only science, it's science, economics, politics, development policy, demography, everything. Second is that we have to be careful about these predictions, and we have to find out ways how to convince people about behavioral. And therefore, when we talk about ozone layer and CO2 and all, I think I submit to you that the local reality is much more important. Thirdly, this goes to comments made by Professor Gadgil, because he told us about how 70,000 crores had gone down the drain, and how the mining interest, coal mining in Goa, or sand mining in the Ganga, or the nuclear power reactor coming up supposedly in Jaitapur. So you're saying he was kind of making a reference to the commercial and business interests, economic interests, if I can call them. And they seem to come in the way when we are trying to do this climate change mitigation or climate change enlightened and somewhat, more scientific, more rational policies. So I don't know. The message I was getting is that ultimately these business profits and short-termism, somebody said, I think Dr. Malik said, this quarterly profit obsession. So, but I want to caution you that this is the world we live in. And again, I want to quote somebody slightly out of context, but it's relevant, that there is one gentleman called R.F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, the same name as the late Robert Kennedy. He is now the Secretary of Health, if I'm not mistaken, in America. And he's a very strong, of course, supporter of President Trump. But just last year, I think, before President Trump got elected, he made a very frank, very famous speech. It's on YouTube. And he was saying that America is giving 180 or 200 billion dollars to Ukraine. Where is it going? So he said that the real reason is because this money, and this is on record. Mitch McConnell, I think the Speaker of their Parliament, was on record as having said that this money is actually, don't think of it as it's going to Ukrainian. It's not down the drain, because it's helping these companies, American companies. Which are these companies? Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics. Who are these? Defense manufacturers. So you Americans, don't worry. This money is not going away. That's why they were supporting. I mean, this is RFK saying it, okay? Robert Kennedy, who's now the secretary, their health minister. And then he said, okay, then just to make it sweeter, what do? That they said this money is going to Ukraine, but it's not a grant, it's not a subsidy, defense, but we are going to give it as a loan. Why should we use the loan language? By the way, this was before Trump got elected, so this is the Biden administration. Why do we use the loan language? Because then it's going to be, you think that it's going to be repaid. Do you think it's going to be repaid? Of course not. Ukraine is going to be devastated. They're not going to repay. So what happens? Well, we will ask our pound of flesh. We will ask for their resources. Guess what? Mr. Trump is continuing that Biden strategy. So we want your rare earths, we want your minerals, we want your land. So the deal is already done. Apparently, see, Ukraine is the wheat basket of Europe. I think 30-40% of wheat is produced. It's an agricultural food basket. Forget about all the rare earths and minerals. So 30% of agricultural land, apparently wheat producing land, has already been, the papers have been signed that they're going to be transferred to American owners. Who are the owners? Companies like Cargill, Monsanto, and which is the other company? DuPont. Please take my comments in the context of what Mr. Gadgil said, okay? I'm not, so I just want to relate to you. And who are these companies? Whether it's General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, or DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto, they are on, RFK says, I'm just quoting, Robert Kennedy says, they are all owned by BlackRock. Now you'll say, who is BlackRock? Anybody know who's BlackRock? BlackRock is the world's largest mutual fund. Just like you may have ICICI Mutual Fund and Reliance Mutual Fund and Nippon, there is a mutual fund called BlackRock. It's the world's largest. It's $12 trillion. So who owns the mutual fund? It's American public. It's an equity investing public. So you see how they what I'm trying to say is there is so much interconnection. So now you're trying to point fingers. It's Boeing. No, it's BlackRock. No, it's American public. You see the economic interest. What I want to say is that while we are talking about this climate change impact, all this disaster scenario, it's so interconnected. We live in a world which is extremely interconnected, interdependent, interrelated. So now you can't say that the American public is the villain, because they are the ultimate equity owners of mutual fund by BlackRock. The chairman is Larry Fink. He's a very close friend of Trump, I'm sure. But it's not, he's just a mutual fund. A mutual fund holds it in trust. They're called trustees. And who are the mutual fund investors? They are American public, at least tens of millions of people. So you see how this Ukraine thing, so I'm drawing that analogy with climate change. So when we look at the economics of climate change, I want you to understand and appreciate this interdependence, interrelatedness. And therefore we come to my next point, that when we are talking about economics of climate change, there are there are two issues here. Uh, there are two issues when we discuss climate change and economic. There's basically prices, or the incentive price effect, and there's externality. So on the price thing, I will just postpone the discussion. If there's time, we'll come to it. But I want to focus basically on the externality aspect. Climate change is what in economics we call the effect of externality. That is, if a company is producing, say, an industrial product, then it is letting some pollution into the atmosphere or some effluents into the river, and that is something that it is not bearing the cost. As cost of production, when you put money in, when you put your effluent in the Bhima River, so what do we do? So that is the source of our local pollution. Eventually, even carbon, greenhouse gases in the environment is because we are, for example, a country like India. India is it's number third, right? You said it's the third largest producer of greenhouse gases. First is China now, second is America, and third is India, not very far behind. So why is that? Because 60% of our energy that we use, the lights which are running in this auditorium, the microphone here that I'm speaking, my mobile phone, all these are getting charged by energy, and that 60% of that commercial energy is coming from burning fossil fuels. That's a reality. And India is still not, despite our ambition to get to whatever, 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030, today the reality is 60% is coming from fossil fuels. So we are major contributors to this greenhouse gases. Same thing with industrial effluents and air quality index. You know, they say that something like 90% of humanity, this is a shocking number, 90% of humanity today breathes polluted air. I should be speaking with a mask here. That's the reality. 55% of the world's population is already urbanized. Urban air is not so this. I just want to dwell on this externality bit. What is externality? Externality means you do an economic activity and there are unintended consequences of it on somebody else, which that somebody else is bearing the cost. Typically, it's not bearing the benefit but bearing the cost, and you don't pay. So they say, how do you fix this? So by the way, one example of externality is that when I stand here in front of you, I inhale oxygen, hopefully O2, and I exhale CO2. So even when I stand here, I'm imposing an externality. Every second, every few seconds, there is CO2 coming out of my. So all of us are doing that. In fact, they say that for a human being, if you remove the impact of my clothing or my other activities, just the fact of being an alive human being, in a lifetime, my contribution is going to be 14 trees, right? Because trees and plants, they take in CO2 and they exhale oxygen. So if you are worried about greenhouse gases and CO2, one of the major contributors are this 9 billion people, human beings. So each human being, they estimate, is about 14 trees. So if we want to neutralize at least just merely breathing and carbon impact of human beings, you need 140 billion trees to be planted. So these are all macro numbers. Does it bother us? Well, it's not so simple, because if you live in Kothurud or maybe in Dharavi or somewhere on Chandni Chowk, in not Chandani Chowk but Chandni Chowk of Delhi, then it is so congested that this externality will start becoming real, because otherwise it's negligible. If you live in Canada, so the population density is that one person in maybe 10 square kilometers. So it is not the scientific fact that there is an externality is correct, but when it comes to the economics of it, it matters what is the population density. So therefore, when we urbanize, we increase the population density. That's when these problems start becoming visible and real, and they start affecting us, and then we start responding. And so, what do we do then? By the way, we keep saying that India is a high population density, but Netherlands has, I think, something like twice of India's population density. We never think of Netherlands as a highly polluted country. It's highly urbanized. It's 90% urbanized. India is only 35% urbanized. But we never think of Netherlands as a highly polluted country with very high AQI. In fact, the interesting thing, I just randomly chose the Netherlands because it's quite a congested, I mean, sorry, not congested, it's a country with high population density. It's actually more than Bangladesh or something. Why did I choose, why am I thinking of Netherlands? Because Netherlands area is 1/80th of India. So India's land mass is 80 times of Netherlands. And guess what is Netherlands? Agriculture production, not just agriculture. They're fruits, vegetables, and food grains. The value of that is 3 times of India. So India exports, sorry, agriculture exports, not production, but exports. So production is even more. India's exports are $40 billion annually. Today, this year, Netherlands is 120 billion, 123 billion. So what is it they're doing? Is there something that we can learn from them? They're more congested than us, quote unquote, that is higher population density. Their land mass is 1/80th, and their exports are 3 times, agriculture exports. So it's the economics, how the economics works along with incentives. So so basically, what we think about what we think about externalities that we propose solutions. So we say that there should be taxes, there should be penalties. Then for example, when I said the factory has a smokestack, then a few years later we introduced legislation called scrubbers. So you scrub the sulfur dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So you have to install those scrubbers. So these are all requirements, legislative requirements. But as Dr. Gadgil also told us, when it comes to, then we do carbon trading, then we do emission caps. Or for example, in Mumbai city, the government is proposing congestion pricing. So if you drive into the city, say you go to South Bombay, you'll have to start paying, I don't know how they're going to enforce it, but basically, so we think that by enforcing pricing and penalties, we will, the economics will curb the externality. Think of climate change as externality. But Dr. Gadgil also told us, we have all these rules, but enforcement is not strong at all. So we can't, in a country like India, you can't just say that, oh, let's make a rule that carbon taxes will be $20 a ton or $15 a ton. But where is the enforcement? So without enforcement, without a strong capacity of government capacity for strict enforcement, we cannot actually just depend on rules. So I'm just to give a contrary example, a country like Sweden, you know how much garbage they recycle? Country like Sweden, what percentage of their garbage is recycled? The answer is 110. Why is it more than 100? Because they import garbage. So actually, they are desperately looking for garbage. They incinerate all of the garbage, but so the trucks have to go from Germany and some other countries. They have to import from sometimes Russia also. So they are a country which is importing. So much to learn from them. How do they do? I give you the example of Netherlands. I'm giving you the example of Sweden. But behind all this, please remember, if you see those videos, if you go to Sweden, it's a very elaborate system. So it is very sophisticated, very polished, very elaborate, but it hides the fact that it's very capital intensive also. Even the agriculture in Netherlands, even the packaging of their cabbage or their lettuce or their fruits or their tulips, it's the automated, very shiny, aluminum clean lines, like, dust free, but it hides a lot of capital intensity. Can India afford that? Of course not. And are we able, is it hiding something else? The aluminum has to come from somewhere else. It's produced maybe by Alcoa, by burning fossil fuel. So that is not there visible in Netherlands. So similarly, the Swedish fantastic story of recycling 110% of the garbage is the incinerators. They're made from metal. Where did the metals come from? So we have to take a much more holistic. So what happens is that when you start talking about externalities and way of looking at it holistically, this environmental and climate change subject forces you to think in much more holistic terms. At some point, actually, I'm going to run out of time quickly. At some point, you got to start thinking, should we now also start advocating lower growth? It seems like a shocking and a completely heretical thing to say that well, it's not new. I think at least the great M.K. Gandhi has said it, or maybe other people. The person who wrote that book, Small is Beautiful, or go back to Henry David Thoreau, or people of, even before that, that is it that we have to now think about that we have to reduce our ideas of economic growth. We have to reduce our ideas of per capita consumption. We have to reduce, so that is something that we, among all the ideas that we present here, that we need to have better taxation, carbon trading, more incentives, penalties, punishments, but also can we start talking about that perhaps we need to think totally different way of thinking about development, which actually means reducing levels, not just not growing, not just growing at 0%. One good example of that is the country called Japan. Today, Japan is the fourth richest country in the world in terms of aggregate GDP. Number one is America. Number two is China, very closely number two. Number three is Japan. Number four is Germany. Number five is India. India is going to overtake Germany, they say, very soon. So Japan is third richest country in terms of aggregate GDP. There are only 110 million people there, less than Bangladesh, less than 1/10 of India. What has been their GDP growth rate in the last 35 years, since 1990? Answer is zero. Average GDP growth rate over the 35-year period is just about zero, maybe 0.3, 0.1. Per capita income has been rising. Why? Per capita income is GDP divided by the denominator. The denominator is shrinking. Every year there are 1 lakh fewer Japanese. What happens to them? Well, what else is about this country? Highest life expectancy in the world, among the highest, among the major economies, is something like 90. Lowest incidence of obesity. Highest forest cover, green cover. Highest rainfall. This is the third richest country in the world. And of course, leaders in miniaturization, leaders in technology, leaders in various things. So there is something to be learned from them. They have been growing at 0%. But you can say, oh, it's okay for them. They are so rich, they can afford to grow at zero. But that's the change in paradigm I'm suggesting to you. That can we think about new paradigms where actually growth doesn't become the sole focal point? And here I want to suggest, and I've said this earlier also, that we have to start thinking in terms of not economic efficiency, but also this, when you talk about externalities, climate change, and global warming, you have to start talking about issues like justice, fairness. Are we not, when we are using more than what the capacity to bear of this ecosystem, it's actually destroying something which is not going to be available to the future generations. So I think Dr. Malik got a little emotional that when he looks at children, young people, but Dr. Malik has not seen even the unborn people. There are a lot of people who are unborn. They're yet to be born. So that language to use, I think, is chori. The most stark language is ki chori. We are stealing from them. When you overuse the ecosystem or ecological footprint, we are actually stealing from unborn people. They don't have a voice, they don't have a vote, they're not around, you can't see them suffering, but we are already stealing from them. This is very easy to explain in the context of economics. When you have a fiscal deficit, the government is spending more than it's earning. Where does the deficit come from? Where does this extra spending come from? By borrowing. Who are you borrowing from? The taxpayers. No, not just the taxpayers, the unborn people, because the tax burden is going to be passed on to the new generation. India's debt to GDP ratio today, total aggregate debt is about 300 trillion rupees, 300 lakh crores. Is it going to be repaid? No, this is next generation, it will be 320. So therefore, debt burden is increasing, and वो बोझा तो डोके और कोना चाहिए वो डोके रहते हैं. On whose head? The people who are not even born. Those suckers, उनको क्या पता कितना tax बढ़ने वाला है. Same thing, it's easier to understand in fiscal level. Same thing about ecological deficit. You're stealing. So therefore, you have to now start bringing from economic efficiency and economics of penalties and incentives and subsidies, you have to bring in ideas of justice, of fairness, of ethics, of empathy, because you have to have empathy for those unborn children. Otherwise, if I don't care, if I don't know who they are, I don't care. Empathy, and may I say, with some trepidation, morality and spirituality. I know I'm just venturing into very delicate, dangerous territory, But economics is completely silent on these issues. Economics has nothing to say about ethics. I'm taking permission from my profession that the textbooks will not say much. They have nothing to say about it. What is just, what is unjust, what is fair, what is unfair, what is moral, what is immoral. The morality to comes from religion. By the way, I want to distinguish between religiosity and morality can be summed up in one language. One sentence. It's a statement from the Bible, but it's very simple. वो छोटे छोटे राजू को भी छोटे रीता को भी समझता है. Do unto others as you them do to you. तुझ्या हातातनं खेचून घेतलं चॉकलेट चालेल का तुला? So don't snatch the chocolate from your friend. So same thing. It's just that's morality. So we have to bring in this concept when you talk about climate change. That you have to bring in your discourse. So I'm going to now conclude by saying that but there's lots of things to say, but let me summarize by saying that there are top 10 environmental issues in the world, and these are greenhouse gas, carbon, for want of a better word, short form we say carbon dioxide, but we mean global warming. It has, as Dr. Krishnan told us, it has increased by 48% since 1990. Then air quality index, AQI, I told you 90% of humanity lives with polluted air. So Delhi people, you're not alone. Number 3, oceans. That we talk about microplastics. Oh, I forgot to read out. Anyway, there's so many things to say, but this microplastics, I have to say something that, in the southern Pacific, there is a patch of land which is called the Great Pacific Garbage, I think it's called. Have you heard of this? The area of that is it's about 1.6 square kilometers. 1.6 million square kilometers. It's bigger than twice the size of Texas. But let me just read out. Despite the common public perception of this patch, it's expanding, okay? This huge garbage floating in the oceans. Despite the common public perception of the patch existing as a giant island of floating garbage, actually its density is very, very low. It's only 4 particles per cubic meter. So therefore it prevents detection by satellite imagery. And even by casual boaters or divers, they don't see it. It's invisible. This is because the patch is widely dispersed in an area consisting primarily of suspended fingernail-sized or smaller microscopic particles. That's what we call microplastics. Who knows how much of it is coming into our food chain? Or it has already not coming, has come and gone. We are all part of it. And so that's the number 3. So carbon dioxide, air quality, oceans, energy. I told you 60% of India's energy is coming from fossil fuels. Then 5th is food. Can we sustain, when we say India, we always, economists like to predict or forecast what is our food demand. This year we have produced 300 million tons. Our population is growing at this percent. Our changing food patterns, we are cooking less at home, going to restaurants. There's more processed food, more pizzas being eaten, and so on. So food demand projection. But uska kya matlab hai? So we say that India's demand for food grain is going to increase at a faster rate because more people are now eating outside, which is a fact, and more it's going from coarse cereal to fine cereal. It's going more towards processed food. More importantly, it's going more towards non-vegetarian. So now we need to produce corn or wheat or feedstock, not only to feed the human beings, but to feed the cattle which will be eaten by the human beings. So it's a exponential growth. So therefore, this is the 5th problem, the food challenge. It all affects, do we need to now start advocating more plant-based food? I know, there'll be the, religiously forward vegetarians and non-veg. This is not the debate I want to start. But this is, if you want to talk about climate change, you can't escape this issue. That should we now advocate plant-based food rather than building a lot of food to be eaten by animals, to be eaten by, I don't know, biodiversity, urbanization, I mentioned, water scarcity. India is already water scarce. They say how much it is, what is the definition? It is 1,000 meter cube per person or something like that. So India is already a water-stressed country. So let me repeat, carbon dioxide, air quality index, oceans, energy, food, biodiversity, urbanization, water scarcity, meteorological, which Dr. Krishnan said, and finally, population and waste. So population itself, and I know this is a very, very big area to discuss whether population is a good thing or a bad thing. Is it a boon or a bane? We started by saying hum do, hamare do. For 40 years, we did this family planning campaign. And now, of course, you heard Mr. Stalin and others saying, why are we being punished? Because delimitation means we lose parliament. But in the same time, the other chief minister of Andhra Pradesh saying, no, you have to produce at least 3 children, or 4, or maybe 5. Singapore. So, but population also is something we need to think about. So these are, I would like to submit by ending by saying that these are issues which will affect, so that I did not discuss climate change in a narrow context about 2-degree heating and so on. It has to be thought about holistically, and we have to go into ideas which are far beyond just economic efficiency and incentives, including ideas we have to bring into the discourse of ideas of justice, fairness, and morality. Thank you very much. I've taken too long. Thank you.
I would kindly request Professor sorry, I'm so sorry. Director Major General Nitin Gadkari to please present a token of appreciation to Dr. Ajit Ranade, sir.